Hi, I'm Greg Hunter, and welcome to Leadership2Go for camp and conference professionals. Have you ever used a tool for a purpose it wasn't intended for? Have you tried to drive a nail with a pair of pliers, or cut a radiator hose with a soft drink can? In today's lesson, Dr. Tim Elmore talks about simplicity, or simplifying our tools and our processes so that they are the most effective they can be. I'll be back in just a few minutes with additional questions and thoughts. But until then, here's Dr. Tim Elmore.
I want to make a statement to you that's going to sound really random. I believe a number 3 pencil can teach us a lot about communicating and leading. Here's a story. Years ago, there was a pencil company that was located right next to a university, and they wanted to make a donation to the school. So the executives got together and they decided to donate some pencils to every student in the student body. They decided, however, to donate a number 3 pencil, not a number 2 pencil, which you typically would use on a test. They found out about 2 days later that the students were throwing their number 3 pencils in the trash. They were found all over in the bushes and the grass. It seemed that no student was wanting to use one of these number 3 pencils. And one of the pencil company executives asked one of the students, "Why aren't you using the gift we gave you?" The students all said, "Because they're too hard." And it's true. I don't know if you remember ever using one of these in kindergarten, but the number 3 pencil has a much harder lead than the number 2 pencil. In fact, you have to push way down on the paper to get any kind of mark on the paper. And eventually you go, "It's too much work, it's too hard, I don't want to use this." And herein lies another truth for us as leaders and communicators. Whatever message it is you're trying to communicate, if it's too hard, people won't do it. They won't use it. In other words, if the message becomes too complex or just too hard to understand, they'll throw it away like a number 3 pencil. It's not that people won't do hard things, but the message has to be simple and clear if it's going to get through. And far too often, we communicators or teachers or leaders are using number 3 pencils with students. And they're just saying, it's too hard. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in this scenario like I have many, many, many times? Let's say you're on a campus and you're in a big gathering and some leader steps up front and they're going to make announcements. And the announcement time, they start going through all the housekeeping items they need to go through. And then finally this man up front starts making this announcement about signing up for an activity. And up front he starts going into all the activities of this thing that's coming, this event that's coming up. And he says something like, "All right, if you want to sign up for this event, just go down the hallway to the left." No, make that the right. But as you go down the hallway, you're going to notice a big wide door. Go through the big wide door on the left. And when you go through the wide door, there should be a clipboard on one of the tables there over in the center of the room. Now, if the clipboard's not on that table, you want to look at the yellow table. You'll find it there. And you see he starts losing people in the process. Eventually, this announcement becomes this thing of incredible complexity. And pretty soon, everybody in the room is pretty much checked out. In fact, this man up front who has wanted to get people involved has completely turned them off. Most people in the room, in fact, are saying, "Well, I want to get involved, but not that bad." And pretty soon there's this huge gap between this guy and all the listeners in the room he wants to enlist in action. The problem was not they didn't want to be involved. The problem was, as he's downloading the information, it's just way too complex. I want to get involved, but not that bad. Now, I may be exaggerating a bit, but I think you get the point. We've all been on one side or the other of this kind of equation. Either the speaker, the leader up front, downloading our message, or the recipient. But somewhere in the mix of sharing our message, we look at the faces of our followers and we realize they're checking out. They're not getting it. Or perhaps we've been a part of the audience where our leader is speaking and we're just thinking, "I don't want to do it this bad. It's too complex. I can't remember all the details." And we never sign up, like a number 3 pencil. We don't use it. Let me share with you how this played out at Growing Leaders, our organization in Atlanta. Every year we host a national leadership forum for educators, youth workers, etc. Anybody that works with students. And in the past we felt like we needed to share the entire theme, message, all the points we're going to make. We would our website was loaded with copy. Well, we noticed that even though we felt like it was good copy, some people weren't signing up, and we later find out it was because they weren't quite sure what it was all about. There was too much going on. We decided this past year, and really the last couple of years, to reduce the message of our National Leadership Forum to one single word. And when we did that, all of a sudden clarity came and people ready to act. I think I can summarize this entire session that I'm doing with you in one simple word. I think great leaders master the art of simplicity. Meaning, they take this complex message, maybe even difficult message, and they simplify it so that it's easy to understand and easy to act upon. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I think great leaders call people to do great things, sometimes difficult things. But here's the difference. They make sure that the message is very simple to understand, and the first action step is simple to take. So I want you to think about your own leadership and own organization right now. Think about a major objective you're trying to pull off, or a major project you're trying to work on, or maybe a major message you're trying to deliver. Is that message or project simplified or reduced to a very easy to understand concept? And is the initial action step easy to take? Think in one sense of yourself as a news reporter. Television news reporters are trained in a very specific way, regardless of the network. They're told to give the lead first, and the lead is the most important information in the first sentence or two. And then all the other information is in declining order based on importance. But is that lead statement very, very clear and very, very simple and very, very easy to understand? For instance, at Growing Leaders, when I meet with our board, when I meet with our team, I may spend hours just reducing down what's the big idea that I want them to understand. And the hours of preparation are far longer than perhaps the meeting that I'm in to get the mission accomplished. This is the labor of a great leader. Here's the key I've learned over the years. If there is one trait the best leaders possess, it's the talent for simplification. The ability to take a complex idea, capture the heart of the issue in simple terms. 1 second after they've located the core fact or the problem, their observation seems blindingly obvious, but somehow nobody had simplified the issue in quite those terms. They took reality and made it manageable for busy teams. So let's say you and I were to sit down and have a cup of coffee alone, and you were to say, Tim, what's the bottom line that I need to remember in order to pull off this kind of leadership? Well, I'd probably say this. One of my heroes in history that mastered this art was Winston Churchill, master communicator and great prime minister over England during the days of World War II. I met a guy who actually fought on D-Day in World War II. And he was on the English beaches before they took off and crossed the English Channel to France. And he said, Tim, we were all scared to death when we were standing out there as soldiers just before we crossed the water. He said, all of a sudden, in a little Jeep, driving up to us, we saw Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of England. And he hopped out of the Jeep and he immediately started shaking our hands and he started talking to us. And then he said, Winston Churchill made a 5-minute speech, upon which he shared basically that he understood that we were afraid. In fact, he said, I remember days when I was afraid in North Africa fighting in the military. And then he said, but gentlemen, this is your hour. The fate of the free world now rests on your shoulders. And he gave them one simple call to action that my new friend said, Tim, we were ready to go. He said, we went from scared boys looking for their mamas to guys that were ready to charge hell with a water pistol. And I asked him, what was it that he did? What did Winston Churchill do in that 5-minute period, flapping his gums, that changed the hearts of everyone out there? And here's what he said. There were basically 5 things that I think work for us today. Number 1, strong beginning. Winston Churchill didn't mince words, thanking people for making this day possible, blah, blah, blah. He jumped right into a strong fact, quote, story. He grabbed them from the very beginning. Strong beginning. Don't mince words. Number 2, simple language. He didn't try to impress anybody with big 50-cent words, and he wasn't trying to get people to be impressed by his knowledge. He was wanting to deliver something in the everyday language of the soldiers. Number 3, one theme. He didn't have 17 points. He didn't even have 3 points. Did you hear me? He had one single central principle or theme that he wanted to get across. 4, pictures. He was a master at using pictures. And I don't just mean visual pictures like this. I mean a word picture, metaphor, a sharing of a story. But in that picture, he illustrated exactly what he wanted them to catch. It was like a point for their head and a picture for their heart. And then finally, emotional ending. Now, by that I don't mean make them cry at the end. I'm simply saying you got to grab their heart, not just their head, if they're going to get on board with you. So he spoke to the heart of the issue. He said things like, gentlemen, the fate of the free world is now resting on your shoulders. And he compelled them to want to go, and the fire began to burn on the inside. But those 5 things were what Winston Churchill used every single time he wanted to communicate a message and not use a number 3 pencil. Strong beginning, simple language, one theme, pictures, and emotional ending. The companies that fail to practice this simple truth start lagging behind in their mission or their sales. The companies that do, however, are the ones that stay on mission and people get it. Think about it. Nike, Disney, Apple. In fact, Steve Jobs, when he was president of Apple, did something every year as a common practice. He called it the top 100. What he would do is he would grab his top most influential employees. In fact, he'd choose those 100 by this criteria. Who are the 100 people I'd want to take with me on a lifeboat if I was crossing the ocean and starting a new company? Those 100 people would get in a retreat center. Steve Jobs would get this big whiteboard up, and they would all start brainstorming what they thought they needed to do next as an organization. Well, they'd write dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of ideas. These are creative people. And then Jobs would go back with that team and they'd start erasing ideas that they thought were dumb. In fact, Steve Jobs would say, that was dumb. They'd finally boil it down to 10 ideas, the top 10 ideas. And at that point, Steve Jobs would unilaterally take an eraser and just erase the bottom 7 and say, these are the 3 we're going to do. But it was the art of simplification that pushed Apple forward, and people bought in. I'm simply saying, if you're going to master this art, you've got to be ready to edit and clarify, simplify. What's the one thing I want them to know? What's the first action step I want them to take? Let me ask you a question. Over the last several years, when the big 3 auto companies in Detroit were needing help financially, why did GM end up needing a bailout from the government and Ford not so much? I think it's this truth. GM had dozens and dozens and dozens of brands, so many brands of cars that they were cannibalizing each other. Ford, on the other hand, totally went about this a different way. They decided to do the one Ford look. They kind of boiled down all their international makes to one simple theme and look. And because of this, they didn't need the bailout. And within a quarter or two, they were a profitable company again. I think it has everything to do, not with tires and steering wheels and transmissions. I think it has everything to do with leadership and the number 3 pencil. So as we begin to wrap this up, let me give you 3 statements that I want you to take with you and put it in your pocket as you go. Number 1, get rid of your number 3 pencils. The things that are too complex, too hard, people just don't seem to be getting. Just get rid of them. Number 2, get to the core of your message and your mission every week of your organization's life. What's the core message? And number 3, reduce and simplify the action. This is the new trend today, according to Harvard Business Review, to simplify the one actionable step. Now, I mentioned to you earlier that Winston Churchill followed a set of simple rules about strong beginning and pictures and emotional ending. I don't know if this was ever more clearly illustrated than a simple story that took place not long ago. In a downtown area, there was a little boy who was blind and begging for money on the streets. In fact, he sat on a step and had a hat out in front of him, and he had a simple sign that simply said, "I'm blind, need help." A gentleman walked by around noon and noticed when he looked in the hat of this blind boy that not much had been put in there. There wasn't much money in there. And so he dropped a few coins in, and then he asked the little boy if he could take his sign and write a new message on it. Well, the blind boy let him do it. He scribbled a new message and gave it to the boy and said, "Hold this one up now." And he walked away. At the end of the workday, the man came back and noticed that the hat was full of money now. He had had a much better afternoon than morning. And the little boy recognized that it was the man because he heard him talking, and he said, "What did you say on my, how did you change my sign?" And the man said, "Oh, I just said the same thing. I just said it a little differently." And when the little boy asked what he had said on the sign, the man said, "I simply wrote the words, 'Today is a beautiful day, and I cannot see it.'" He had simplified the message, spoken to the heart, and gotten some great action. May this be your story as a leader as well.
I picked up 2 distinct messages from Tim's lesson on simplicity that I think can impact camp and conference ministry. The first is a combination of two things he said, which is first, get rid of the tools that don't work well for our team members, like the number 3 pencil. The second is simplify and focus your action. When I was at Boeing in the late 80s to the mid 90s, it was a time of great process orientation for the company. And that is, every employee had to map out a process for every task they completed. And it can be a huge task like joining the wing of an airplane to the body of an airplane, to how to create a newsletter. But the company believed that when you focused on the steps, that you could then identify the weak link in the chain, fix it, improve it, and make the chain stronger. Then you could also focus on the next weak link and improve that and make the process stronger. In our ministries, it could be in our registration process, it could be in our donor thank you programs, it could be in food service or housekeeping or maintenance. You know what those areas are where sometimes it seems like the ball gets dropped and you don't know why or you don't know how it happened. But I'd suggest, as Tim did, simplifying and focusing on the steps, the action points that need to be taken. Second is simplifying in order to get to the core of the message. I don't know if you have those epic moments before camp begins in the summer or before a great big guest group arrives, and a moment like Churchill used to motivate and inspire the troops. But it makes sense to me that we simplify the message at those times where we paint the picture of the meaning, the purpose, and the part that each member plays in the process of impacting lives for Christ at camp. All of these elements can help rally the team so that everyone is on the same page and you're the most effective ministry you can be. Thank you for joining us today for Leadership2Go. I hope it's been meaningful to you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless you.